Hi guys, Bearded Rogue here, this time with another book. I wanted to talk to you guys about Altered Carbon by Richard K. Morgan. It's a Takeshi Kovacs novel, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. They make a big point of how it's pronounced in the book, and I always mispronounce it in one way, shape, or form, either first or last name. But Altered Carbon is the name of the book. This is a fantastic book if you like cyber noir type storylines or transhumanist sci-fi. Because the basic premise is that advances in technology allow for human consciousness to be downloaded like software. And the author does a really good job of kind of exploring all of the different ways that this could be utilized in a society. Like, for example, if you could download your consciousness as software, you could inhabit a virtual waiting room while people do surgery on your physical body. You wouldn't be inside of it. There'd be no danger of you waking up or any other things. They could do all sorts of radical procedures like install cybernetic upgrades and stuff. You can actually switch bodies. Because your consciousness is downloadable, they can then transfer it into another body, meaning that you could have the body you always wanted if you had enough money to afford it. You could even genetically engineer a body in order to inhabit it. You could live multiple lifetimes if you have enough money. You could, genetically engineer a new body for yourself and inhabit it every time your old body dies. You can effectively teleport. Travel can be done over, Wi-Fi. You can literally beam yourself to a new location and just inhabit a new body while you're there. Bodies become more akin to cars. They're property damage if something happens to them. You can detail them. You can get them all pimped out. Pimping your ride takes on a whole new meaning when your ride is your physical form. There's people who are totally against re-sleeving, as they call it. Your body is your sleeve. Don't believe that this is godly or should be tolerated. So all the protesters to this kind of stuff actually exist. Your body dies, and oh well. If you have enough money, you can just transfer into another one. Or if you were, violently killed, as long as they didn't destroy your stack, the little thing inside of your spinal column that contains your consciousness, we can download you virtually and actually talk to you about who your assailant was. You can be a witness to your own murder. If you want psychological counseling, we can put you into a virtual world and have you interact with the best psychologists that money can buy in a virtual world. And we can dilate time, so you can spend as much time there as you want. We can, in our prison system, we could actually have people serving multiple life sentences, or at least what feels like multiple life sentences to them, because we can dilate time, slow it down, speed it up. If you commit a crime and you're sentenced to jail, we just put you in a hard drive, and then your body becomes property of the state, and we can reuse that body, however we want. So there's all sorts of weird and crazy and amazing things that can happen inside of this kind of a universe. If you're like software, you can illegally copy yourself. How many of you could be running around? And the author has actually thought of most of these scenarios, or I think even all of them that I've mentioned. But even after I read this book, I was still thinking of things that you could do in a world wherein your actual consciousness can be downloaded like software, or copied, or, deleted, or altered, or hacked. I mean, there's so many different possibilities opened up just by the premise of this novel that it excited me. Add on to that it's a almost hard-boiled detective murder mystery, wherein a very wealthy client is reached out to somebody to ask them to solve his murder. It's crazy. it just one of my favorite things is that the main character gets transferred into a body that was addicted to nicotine, somebody who smoked, so he has to smoke or go through withdrawal symptoms just because the body is physically addicted to cigarettes. Just little details like that are very, very interesting. But it's a hard-boiled detective story with some very interesting twists and some very interesting action in it. It's not straightforward. The plot line kind of twists and turns, and you have all of the extra intrigue of who's in what body. I mean, it could look like who they say they are, but are they really that person? Interrogations take on a whole new character if you can, put the person you're interrogating into a different form. It's one of the most interesting speculative worlds I've seen in a long, long time. And it has some sequels that are pretty good books. They're interesting. They kind of continue on with the premise and explore the reality a little bit more. But this one is my favorite, and this one is an absolute work of art. If I had to compare it to a series, I would compare it to Ender's Game in the Ender series, and that the first book is really, really good, and then the other books in the series are all good but of varying quality. Speaker for the Dead's actually my favorite book in the Ender series, so maybe it's not the best example, but Altered Carbon is fantastic. I have read this book multiple times. There's not very many books that I have read multiple times in my life. I tend to, read it once and then kind of move on, but there's always more things to find when I read this, more little subtle clues inside of the storyline, and yeah, I highly recommend this one. If you like sci-fi, if you like Raymond Chandler type noir detective stories, you might like this too, even with its sci-fi premise. It really feels like one of those old school detective books in a lot of ways. And I really, really like it. So I highly recommend it. Altered Carbon by Richard K. Morgan. Check it out, guys. Bearded Rogue, out.